everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the number one health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every one of you that come back every week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, I'm really excited about this conversation today, and I think you're going to absolutely love it because you're going to get practical advice, deep insights, and potentially even a bit of a spiritual awakening. I'm speaking today to Danica Patrick, a former race car driver and the most successful woman in the history of the sport. Since her retirement in 2018, Danica has become a business owner, entrepreneur, and an inspirational speaker. She's launched her own clothing line, written a book, and became an owner of a winery in Napa Valley. She's also the host of the podcast Pretty Intense, a podcast dedicated to helping people become their true best self. I had the pleasure of going on the podcast last year where we talked about my book, Think Like a Monk, and I've been looking forward to interviewing and reciprocating with Danica's love through this podcast. Danica, welcome to On Purpose.
Oh man, it's my honor. I mean, it's through your podcast and a few other friends in which you know well that I've been inspired to do my own. So like-minded missions.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how you can have such different journeys, but we all evolve to this similar value, similar mission, similar purpose. And I think that's what I love so much about getting to do this, is when I look at your journey, I'm like, wow, like after your incredible success and experiences, and if this is what your journey is evolving to, you know, how lucky are we to connect that way? I wanted to start with, though, I saw a lot of posts and videos and things on your Instagram recently of you doing yoga and meditation in nature and by a beautiful river, and just, it's really interesting. And I know I've heard you talk about how nature has been such a big part of your spiritual journey. Tell me a bit about how nature is. We hear a lot about the positives of nature, but for you specifically, how has nature been so deeply connected to your spiritual journey? Such
a great question and so powerful. I'd just say off the bat, quite simply with nature, I would challenge anyone to say anytime they've gone in nature that they feel worse. Like just starting there, like, have you ever gone to the beach? Have you ever walked in the woods? Have you ever gone for just a walk outside in your neighborhood or wherever you live and been like, man, that was terrible. I hated that. It was horrible. The trees were so ugly. I mean, you never do that. Even when you look at a dead tree, you're like, wow, it's winter and look at that tree. It doesn't even care it's dead. It's going to come back to life. Why can't I be more like a tree? I think that's kind of the magic of nature, is that I believe that there's more of a frequency element to it that goes a little deeper, probably more scientific. But I think it's just that, you know, I feel like we want to be like nature subconsciously, like being able to lose our leaves and not care, being able to die and be reborn, being able to grow freely, finding the light. I mean, look at trees and how they, you know, manage to weave their way on up to just find a little bit of light at the top. I mean, I feel like it's a big analogy for what we're all aspiring for. So I think it's a little bit more scientific and subconscious. But then if we just look on the surface, I mean, for the most part, it's beautiful.
I love those examples already. They're absolutely beautiful. And you reminded me of two things as you were saying that. In the Vedas that I studied, there's a beautiful section called the 24 Gurus, and it looks at the 24 Gurus in nature. So it gives some of those examples where it looks at 24 elements of nature, whether that's rivers, trees, animals, flowers, plants, and it shows how we can learn something from them. So you reminded me of that beautiful section. And also what you were saying scientifically, I remember reading about a term, I believe it's called biomimicry, where you basically emulate nature in your life. So what you were giving the example, an example I often give to people is like letting, and this sounds like a crazy thing, but I remember I would sometimes I would see shedded snake skins when I lived in India. And it would always be like, we were told that letting go was like a snake sheds its skin. Like, it's not this forced, like, you don't have to break yourself. You just slither out of, what you don't want to be anymore. And so when you were saying that, seeking the light, and it brought about so many beautiful visuals. And you're so right that I agree with you fully. I think the challenge you set us all today is beautiful. When have you been out in nature and not valued it? And I was trying to think of a time, and I couldn't find one, to the point that I was thinking even visualizations. When I lead visualization meditations, so many people, their most relaxing visualization is in nature. And I think that's such a beautiful message that you're sharing with all of us. And tell me about that. Tell me about how different is that? Because we often talk about this paradox of, we're moving so fast in life that we miss these beautiful things. But the truth is, no one has actually experienced what it means to go as fast as you have, or very little bit. I mean, behind the wheel. Like, you've actually lived life in a way where you are moving. I mean, how many miles per hour are you driving?
Yeah, over 200 almost all the time.
Right. Every time I think I'm cool on the highway, I'm definitely not. Like 200 miles per hour, that is insane. And you're driving with extreme control, of course, and extreme focus. But you think about that life's almost like we're driving 200 miles per hour and we miss these beautiful things. Tell me about the paradox of having lived so much with machines for so long and now spending so much time in nature. Was that different then, or did you always value nature even then?
I think there's sort of a bigger transition concept to talk about, but the first thing that comes to mind is perception. Right. So as I'm narrowly focused, because I have to be on the job and going 200, 230, 200, like, you're very narrowly focused. So it's that point of perception that I'm lasered in on that allows me to do that job. Now, if you just sort of shift that sort of thought into nature and you go, what if I put my point of perception on that flower? What if I put my point of perception on how beautiful it is versus how many branches are broken or whatever? Like, it's all about perception. And so that's kind of what I thought about as you were talking about that. But then I'd say that when it came to this sort of extreme opposites of nature and then machine, if I'm being honest, it was really because of so much exploration of nature and being in it more and doing more yoga, more meditation, more connection to myself spiritually on a deeper level, that I actually started to shift frequency-wise, energetically from the space that I was in. It no longer was really that comfortable for me anymore. And it wasn't necessarily just about driving the car. I think that's more of a dance. That's artistic. It's like a feel thing. It's different than what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, it came in the package, which was, I stopped resonating with these sort of moods that I was experiencing around me, jobs that I was experiencing around me, whether it was just being a jerk on the track to make things happen, or to promote something that you weren't that passionate about, or to watch other people promote things that were just like, and then just the vibe, the sort of vibe that everyone had. There was like a cutthroat, angry nature. It just through a rise in my own frequency of being in nature and doing more things that are in that sort of realm, I just wasn't as happy anymore. And so in that last season of my career, I really like to call it like I let it go. I was open to continuing on if something made sense and happened, but I wasn't forcing it and I wasn't running from it. I was just sort of in the middle, in that neutral ground of allowing. And when it didn't come through, I let it go. And I just thought, it's not for me anymore. So yeah, nature was a real powerful thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to come back to letting it go, but let's dive into what you said there. You were talking about the spiritual journey and the depth. We hear that a lot for a lot of people, and I love asking people to define their own spiritual journey because I think it's so personal and so unique. And there are the practices which I want to dive into of yoga and meditation, but for you as a philosophy of your spiritual journey, like what does that mean to you? How do you define that transition and that focus in your life?
I feel like spirituality is one of those things in my life that I have actually not set a destination on. Almost everything in my life, I'm destination oriented. This is how it's going to turn out. This is where I'm going to live. This will be my life. This is my goal. It will do this. This is the success of it. This is what will mean success. And in my spiritual journey, it's literally like next step, next step, next step. So in this quest of being, I've never really unpacked this verbally like this. So it's a great question. Of being present, I'm actually present with being present. That makes sense. Like I'm allowing myself to just take next steps as they come and as they feel right. And not necessarily thinking about where I want to end up, which is kind of surprising for me, actually.
Yeah, no, it's often what deters people from spirituality because it's so much of a revelatory journey. I know that when we were trained in the ashram, it was always said that a spiritual journey is one that is received, not achieved. Like we'd always hear that constantly to help us move away from that achievement mentality that we could do something.
Receive, not achieve. What does that mean? Explain that.
What it means is that the spiritual journey is revealed to you. It's not something that you can say, I've got it now and I've bottled it up and here it is. Look at my medal, look at my trophy of I meditated for 18 hours today. Look how great I am. It had to be revealed to you, the answer, the next step. And kind of what you're saying now, that when you're present with your step, it's revealed. The next step is revealed to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Cool.
No, you made me think of it in what you were saying of the idea of if you are truly present, it's almost like, I mean, you're making me think about just ways of understanding it and explaining it, but it's almost like if you're trying to get across a river and there's lots of stones everywhere, it's like if you're present on this stone, you can then see the next one and where you want to jump to next. But if you're constantly looking at the other side, you may just fall into the river, right?
I think about too, there's another analogy where you're driving, let's say you're driving from one coast to the next. You can't see the other coast. You just follow those headlights, right? You're just following the headlights. I mean, obviously it's daytime sometimes, but you're following the headlights, essentially like showing you, the next mile or the next half a mile or whatever. And it's not that you can see it, but you just keep following the lights.
Yes.
Following the road.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's a really good one. I really like that analogy. And how do you get comfortable with that uncertainty? Like, how do you get comfortable with really truly being present? Because like you said, in all areas of our life, we all need the goal. We need to see the end. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but how do you get comfortable in that discomfort and that uncertainty and that lack of surety of where this is going?
I guess it's because, I feel like this is an Abraham Hicks line, like, you can't get it wrong and you're never done. Like, I guess there's a thought in my head where I feel like I'm never going to know the answers to the universe anyway. So, like, it would be that would be my answer if I had to set a destination, would be like, oh, I'll know everything there is to know. Like, I'll know everything there is to know about the nature of reality, which relates to me as a human. But I know that we won't get to know, like, until we die. So I guess I don't even know what destination to set because I'm so used to setting the furthest one. So I guess since I don't even know what to set, I just keep taking the next step. Maybe I need to use that in my professional and personal life too. Like, I don't, how much better could it get? Let's see,
Yeah, I think what you said was really interesting is you talked about how when the frequency of what you were experiencing in your career was no longer matching the frequency you were spiritually experiencing, that's when you kind of were able to let go. What do you think about for people who are almost maybe in a toxic work atmosphere or in a space where their career, where they don't have the opportunity, they haven't achieved that level of success where they now can move on or try something new? how have you thought about, and I'm sure you had to do this too, it's never perfect for anyone. It's like, how did you deal with the toxicity or the negativity while you had to, before you could move on and let go? Because I think that's where most of us spend our lives. Like, most of us spend our lives where you have this energy and frequency around you and you somehow have to continue on every day. You have to wake up and go to work and switch on your Zoom call. I'm just thinking about the people in our audience, and I'm sure you had that, that bridge period.
Yeah, and this is so relatable and applicable and useful. And I'd say the first thing that I think about, like for myself, I'm a dreamer. So for me, this is easy, this is natural. It's natural for me to think, what's next? Because again, I'm a future caster, forward thinker, right? So I would say that it's thinking about what it is that you actually want for your life. I feel like I should go backwards and say, if this is your situation, you tend to become so uncomfortable you don't want to be there no matter what. Like, especially if you're nurturing these other aspects of yourself and practices, whether they be spiritual or whatever, you get so uncomfortable you really don't want to be there anyway. And so you by nature might even start to be seeking out other ways to exist, other ways to make money, whatever it's going to take for you to get out of your situation. But I would say, like, a tangible thing that you could do would be to just start, instead of focusing, again, back to perception, because perception's reality. If you would stop, if I stop, you stop, we stop thinking about the aspects about what we're doing that we don't like, by nature then getting more of it. And we start thinking about what it is that we want and envisioning that, dreaming about that, embodying that, visualizing yourself in that life. I trust the universe enough to know that I can't help but get it.
It's hard when you're in the moment, but it's good advice, because I remember spending a few years in the corporate world in between monk life and what I do now. And it's like, I didn't really fit in, or I didn't necessarily love everything I had to do every day, but I was able to use the parts of that job that did make me feel alive and just amplify them as much as I could. And I was like, oh, I'm learning about technology, and I'm learning about this, and I'm learning about connecting with people, and whatever it was. And it was just, when you put your vision and your perception onto those things, all of a sudden, even something really meaningless can start to feel meaningful, because you've started to notice the meaning in it. And I think we just live in a world where we think of it as like, this is meaningless and this is meaningful. But even, I'm sure you could say this, that even on this side of doing things that are more spiritual or meaningful or fulfilling, there's still plenty parts of our lives that we have to do stuff we don't love. Like,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of too, it's another thing, Abraham, I listen to a lot of Abraham too. But another thing that comes to mind is contrast, and how grateful we should be for contrast, because it's in the contrast that it shows us when it shows us what we don't want, we know what we do want. And so, just because something, and it also allows you an opportunity to shift your mindset to gratitude and go, this isn't fun, but I'm so glad I get to go on this vacation, or whatever it is that comes as a result of it. Because to think, like you said, that life is just, this easy breezy flowing extension of vacation after joyful experience after joyful experience, like, it's not realistic. And sometimes we have to do things that we don't really want to do, but when we focus on why we're doing it, it gives it more meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a bit about that practical daily spiritual journey that you're on. You mentioned yoga and meditation. We've seen on Instagram. Tell us about that morning routine of yours, or your daily routine that's giving you that trust, that confidence, because I often feel like that trust, as you said, trusting the universe, that trust doesn't come from just a feeling or a belief. It comes from a set of practices, in my experience, of when you know you're doing something, to have that relationship of trust, because it's a relationship, and a relationship requires investment. So what are some of the investments you're making every morning, every day, that you feel like giving you that sense of, some sense of structure and growth?
Well, you have to find a way to get sort of quiet enough, present enough to notice the signs and synchronicities and feelings of not only yourself, but other people in your environment to navigate accurately where you're going, I think. To get more out of the head and into the body of truly what's sort of like the universe guiding you through messages, through those people or synchronicities. But I would say one of my first practices first morning practices I changed, this was, I think, fall of 18. So it was a long time ago. I stopped watching the news. And I think that was one of the first most productive things. So it wasn't something I actually did. It was something that I didn't do anymore. So I used to wake up in the morning and I'd watch like Good Morning America or, CNN or Today Show or whatever. That was my comfort zone. It was like a familiar pattern, familiar sound in the morning. And I just drink my coffee and make my breakfast. And then as soon as I stopped doing that, and this is something that everyone should know, is that anytime you want to change a pattern, there'll always be discomfort. So I remember, and it's not to revert back, because that's the easy thing to do, but it's to try and figure out something to do, like maybe it triggers something else that you do. So what I started doing is I started watching YouTube videos and watching you on YouTube, or watching our buddy Lewis on YouTube, or Abraham Hicks on YouTube, or whatever it was. I'd start watching YouTube videos, and that was what really kind of gave me a new morning routine. In fact, I think I just posted about it the other day. It was so this is my morning news. And it was breakfast with a Teal Swan video or something. And so that became the norm years ago.
I love that. That is such a big one. I love that. That's so awesome. Choose your news. Choose your news rather than, like you said, you had to disrupt that pattern. And that's the hardest thing to do. And you're so right. The morning pattern and the morning mood is everything. It's everything. And I think we just start in the negatives and then spend the whole day trying to climb up to the positive, as opposed to starting in a strong place and then kind of being broken down throughout the day, which is better than feeling like you're trying to play catch up all day.
It's like school, when you start off with an F, you might still end up with a B at the end of it. But that first quarter, all you're doing is playing catch up and you feel like you're never going to get there. But you start off with an A and you end up with, it just seems so much easier to keep your grades up. Trust me, I'm really scrapping for history here because I'm in school when I was 16. But it's like that whole thing of just playing catch up, or for me in my racing career, it felt like if you could start off in the championship in a really strong way in the first sort of 5 races or so, it felt like you were always ahead of the game instead of playing catch up from a couple DNFs to start the season off. So it's the same thing, micro, macro with your day itself in the 24 hours that you have. So now I'd say in the last 8 months, I've become much more regular with a routine of waking up in the morning and rolling over. And it started when I lived in Indiana for the summer with my parents. And I have meditation pillows. And so I just threw it down on the ground, and it wasn't a big bedroom I was staying in. And so there wasn't a lot of space. So I just threw it next to the bed, and I ended up realizing, oh, that's perfect. You get up and you just go sit down. That's the right spot to put it. So then when I moved back to Arizona and, got my house and filled my, my meditation spot up, it's just right next to the bed. And so I get up and, I sit down and I meditate, and then sometimes I journal, sometimes I pull cards, I burn things, whether it be Palo Santo or certain incense. As we talked about in our interview, what was it? Sight, set, what was it again?
Sight, sense, and sounds. Yes.
Yes. So setting that up. And then sometimes this morning I did yoga afterwards, but sometimes it's just going to the kitchen and having coffee. For a little while I was going to the kitchen and having coffee and then coming back, and I'm like, no. I took like the body under control and I went, I know you want to automatically walk to that kitchen and get the coffee that you want to have, but like take control of that and say, it is my decision what I do with the body, and it's going to sit down and it's going to meditate now. The one thing that I'm trying to do, and this is like, I was just thinking about this the other day, and it's funny, I was about to go to bed and I was starting to do what I wanted to do. And I was like, wait a second, my mom hasn't texted me back today. And I left her a pretty good message. Like, I thought she would have responded. I better not. This is what I want to do. Either leave my phone in the kitchen so that I don't go to bed and wake up looking at messages. For some reason, I have a default to like look at my messages, like first thing. And it's my alarm if I need an alarm. So I'm like, I need to get one of those old school clocks. And I need to leave my phone in the kitchen. Or, because I also think of EMF, like radiation, like signals. So I think, so then at a minimum, I could at least turn my phone on, off of Wi-Fi and onto airplane mode next to me. And then so I won't actually nothing will have come through in the night anyway. And then once I'm ready, I can still use it as an alarm. But then when I'm ready, I can turn on all my systems and go. But that's what I need to do next. But it was like the other night, like the ego was like, your mom might not be okay. And I didn't.
I remember when I first trained myself to not look at my phone first in the morning, I used to lock my devices in my car outside. So I would lock my laptop, my phone, like all my devices outdoors so that I couldn't even like get up and go and grab it from the other room because I knew that it was too hard, because you're right, it was so hardwired. And I started waking up to a post-it note that says, I am awareness, or I am the soul, or some sort of spiritual affirmation that resonates with me. And it would be in my handwriting. It's on a little post-it note. It's next to my desk. And then now I've started to change that sometimes for a little quote that I read in the morning, or there's like just a highlighted line in a book. And I feel like when you start off that way, you stop your mind starting with anxieties. Like I get anxious, I get worried. I can wake up feeling, misaligned. And that changes as soon as the first thought you consume from the external world is a thought that is aligned and a thought that is powerful. And whether it's from someone's favorite book or even from someone's favorite podcast. And I love that idea that you're sharing on helping yourself to stop looking at your phone first thing in the morning. And I love the idea of the meditation pillow right there. I think that's brilliant. It's a visual reminder. And I think we need these visual triggers and reminders to not have to make every decision in our head.
Make it as easy as we can make it, right? Not put it in another room where you're like, oh, I haven't been in my meditation room in a while. Like it's definitely like every time I walk by to go to my bed, I have to walk by my table and walk by the pillow, walk by my rug, walk by everything. I put a lot of intention into setting up so that the space is ready. And to make it beautiful too, I'd say that too. Like, if you want to create a practice, like, why wouldn't you decorate it? Why wouldn't you make it beautiful? Why wouldn't you make it inviting? Why wouldn't you put a beautiful rug down? Why wouldn't you have a pillow? It doesn't have to be like drill sergeant kind of like something that you have to endure. Like enjoy it. My meditation table, my altar has pictures of my family, pictures of my dogs. It has, crystals and certain significant things that I've picked up along the way. It has a mala that I do mantras to, or it has a pendulum that I'll ask questions to. It has decks of cards that I can pull from. It has books. It has journals. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I had no idea. I love hearing about your altar. That's beautiful. It sounded, I'm going to backtrack a little. You reminded me when you were saying you're walking past the pillow, it reminded me of like a mindful walk of shame. It's like you're walking past this beautiful space to be mindful, and you like feel the positive guilt of, I should use this space. Tell us about, now I want to talk about your altar. That sounds so amazing. I think the idea of having an altar. So I grew up with an altar in my home, and, my parents grew up Hindu. And so having an altar has been a very normal part of my life. And having deities and having crystals and malas and everything you were saying, like, and books, very, very normal in my house. And then even now, my wife and I have our altar in our home here, and we've placed our altar in our meditation space as the heart of our house. So whenever anyone comes to our home, it's the first place you see. Everyone walks through it. It's the first place I see after I wake up and come upstairs. Tell us a bit about, like, you already dived into it, but I love the idea of setting up an altar. If someone doesn't know what that is, or if someone's more new to that concept, why has it been helpful, and how did you even discover that? Was that common in your home or background, or something you were aware of?
No, this actually started back in North Carolina when I lived there. I lived there for 5 years, and I feel like I don't know where I picked it up, but it was like I was for a while, I was picking up things at antique stores, and it was like this old little cart thing, and it started really slowly where it was just the extra room where it would be like a pool table or something like that would go in it right off the pool in the backyard. And then I was like, can I move some of this stuff over? And then I was like, I'll do a little yoga. And then it was like, well, what if I move it all the way to the corner? And then I go in the middle of the room, and then what if I move that out and let's paint this room? And then what if I buy a bunch of little knickknacks and start hanging them? And so I progressively kind of made this my room, which is when I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Pretty Intense. I have a whole chapter dedicated to your woman cave, because it always seems like guys have like their man cave, but
that's so good.
Have their woman cave. So it started like that, and then I had this table, and I started just putting things on it that I like, books and things like that. And then it just sort of like migrated into being a meditation table. And I had, my eye pillow, I had like lavender spray, and I had all kinds of little things on this table. And I was like, wow. And back in those days, if I would be sitting there meditating, I would have been called weird. So I didn't do it as much. But I had like a meditation table, and I would do it sometimes when I was alone. But it was also originally really just a place to put a lot of really meaningful things to me. And I think if I'm pulling from like, where I grew up and culture, it's like almost feels blasphemous to say you have an altar.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering if that was the case. Yeah.
Yeah. And since I didn't grow up in church, in fact, my mom said not long, like a year or so ago, she was like, I'm sorry I didn't take you guys to church. I'm like, that's okay. And not because there's anything wrong with it, just because it kept my scope really open. And also I don't have those really negative attachments of sort of it being blasphemous or wrong. And it's the intention that matters. That's what I focus on. So this intention of a space that's really dedicated to loving not only myself, but loving people in my life and aspects of my life. So that's kind of how it started. But I really think that that's kind of I would guess that's what holds a lot of people back from creating what they would call an altar. You probably even heard me call it like a meditation table or whatever, just because it's lingo that's not.
Yes.
It's just like a little more inappropriate. Or
I do the same. I can relate to that. I do the same all the time. I'll say my meditation space or whatever, and it's just because you don't want to alienate.
What's the definition of altar? To me, the definition of altar, I really don't know. What is the definition of altar?
I don't know about the English dictionary definition, but I know about the definition of from a spiritual Vedic place. It would be that this is considered the temple within your home. So, and what is a temple? A temple is a place that reminds you of your eternal connection with higher energy, the divine, the source. So a place that is of spiritual memory would be considered the definition of, having a temple in your home, a place that reminds you of who you are, what you believe in, and what you really care about.
For a while, so I've gone to all kinds of churches in my life. I became a Catholic at one point in my life and went to that church. And then I went to Baptist church, and then I didn't go to any church, and I started off going to no church. But I remember what I always used to be able to say, even in the very beginning going to church, was that I really felt like I could be just as spiritual, just as religious at home. And it doesn't take this building to make it happen. And in fact, if I don't show up here and get a message, what's the point? That's blasphemous, right? So I've always had this innate knowing that like, it's not some destination that is like opening up some space portal or permission to like live a certain way or be loved on some like religious spiritual level. I don't subscribe to that. So yeah, I encourage everyone to have their own altar. Like
whatever that means. Yeah,
have your own nook, your own corner. I think it's just it helps kind of add to this sort of idea of like make the space beautiful. If you had a spot that was filled with things that made you smile, wouldn't you want to go there?
Exactly. And we don't have that. I think that's a great tip and great insight. And I don't think we've ever shared that message on the podcast before. I think it's a really, really great idea. And I loved how you described it there, a place that makes you smile. Danica, in your career though, it's obviously you've had to be an extremely disciplined, focused individual to achieve what you've achieved. It doesn't come through anything but that hard work. Tell us about the idea of building a habit, because you had to build habits to become a successful race car driver. You've now built different habits to focus on your spiritual journey. If someone's listening and watching and going, how do I build better habits? Like I can't get myself, even if I built this beautiful decorated room and I put the pillow down, but I just walk past it and now I feel guilty that I don't meditate. And I keep hearing everyone tells me to do yoga and Pilates and meditation, but and I'm sure you meet people who say this to you all the time. Like, where does someone start with habit formation from your experience of building habits?
Well, first off, I think it's very difficult to just say, everyone should XYZ. Because it might not really be for you. I think there are so many different mindful modalities of life. And I know that I don't do all of them. I do some of them. So I think the important part is figuring out which of those some really are for you and easy for you. Like it doesn't have to be hard. You know, maybe for someone, it's getting up in the morning and writing 5 things that they're really grateful for, and that feels easy for them. It's not something I do, you know, but that is a practice of mindfulness, of gratitude, of spirituality, of getting in the right mindset. So for me, I think that it's more a matter of like testing the waters of a bunch of different things that you could do that make you feel good. And so that's really just comes through testing. It just comes through testing. Some people, some people are going to love meditation. Some people are going to really love yoga. Some people are really going to love a walk with their dog. Some people, there's so many different ways to connect with yourself, to create practices and habits. And so I guess maybe not thinking about habits as being like, oh, these are the ones that you have to subscribe to. Go with the ones that feel natural to you. Like go with the ones that feel good. Like I love to work out. Guess what? It's a habit. If I hated to work out, I'd probably try and choose a different sort of form of, moving my body other than going in a gym and throwing some weights around. So, and I think that's really about following what it is that it feels like is natural for you. And then it always ends up at a deeper level. I mean, we treat others as we treat ourselves. So if you feel like you're worth the time to have a habit, then you tend to respect others that do too. So it always just starts with yourself. It starts with the self-worth enough that you deserve the time to take an hour to go work out, or take a half an hour to go meditate, or take an hour and a half to go to a yoga class. Like it starts with believing that you deserve it. And then also your why. Like, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you have to? Are you doing it because you are being guilted? Are you doing it because someone told you this is what's going to be good for you? Are you doing it because you want to feel good? Are you doing it because it does feel good? Are you doing it because you enjoy the place that you arrive at when you're done doing it. Find your why. Like, I mean, as like a specific example, I can be pretty regimented, like with my food. I'm very, I don't eat gluten and dairy and beans. There's like a bunch of things I don't eat. And it's really easy for me to stick with it because of my why, which is that I want to feel good. And so I know that when I eat things that are not in my sort of normal lineup, that it makes me either feel bloated or distended or, whatever. It can cause breakouts. It can, there's a lot of other things. And I'm like, I just don't want to feel bad. Yeah. So it makes it easier to do it. So when you know why you're doing it, you keep going. It's like another specific example would be, say you're going on a beach vacation and you got to put a swimsuit on. Mm-hmm. Guy or girl. And you're really good about what you eat and working out for a couple of months before you go because you have your why, right? It like makes things so much, or you're getting married and, especially girls are like, I'm getting married, and like you have your why. It makes the job a lot easier when you know why you're doing it. So having a why is also helpful.
I think there's a great piece of advice. I've been going on about this on the podcast, but it's been real for me, and it's what you're saying definitely aligns. So I've never enjoyed going to the gym or working out, but I've always enjoyed sports. So I love sports, extremely athletic, enjoy competition, like fun competition and back and forth. And during the pandemic, and since I've really moved to the US, I used to play football, soccer thrice a week in London, because all my friends play, and that's where I grew up, and we'd play after work in the evenings. And then when I moved to the United States, for the first 2 years, I lived in New York, and I was very busy with my career and didn't really make that much time for it. And then when I moved to LA, I realized that getting 22 people to play a game of football was pretty difficult any weekend. Like, that's pretty tough to do. And I recently took up tennis. And I'm not good at tennis. I haven't played tennis historically, but I'm absolutely in love with it because it's playful, it's fun. I run and sweat more than I ever would if I went to the gym and I was on a treadmill. And I feel like I start my day just with this like childlike enthusiasm because it reminds me of being at school or, that kind of feeling of like I just played a game of tennis at the beginning of the day. And I do that about 3-4 mornings a week now. And not only am I getting better at tennis, but the idea of what you're saying of like, you got to have fun with it. And my why for exercising has always been to stay healthy and to never let my bad health be my own cause. Like, that's always been a very clear thing for me. It's like, if something's going to happen to me, if it comes from the outside, that's fine. I don't want to be the one creating it for myself because of my negligence or whatever it may be. And but the why for me of going to the gym or like that feeling just never worked for me because I've never really been into like, oh, look at my muscles or this. That's not been my why. But for me, the idea of feeling happy every morning, like you said, feeling good, it's a huge one. So yeah, I encourage everyone because for ages I didn't feel like I enjoyed working out and I kept questioning like what I was going to do to stay fit. And then when you find it, it's like, oh, this is so obvious. But it's been life-changing.
You can order your eggs a million ways in the morning. You can do a million different workouts. You can do a million different mindful practices. There's something for everybody out there. So just because you don't fit into one box that somebody's talking about doesn't mean that you can't do it,
Yeah. I heard you say something on a podcast with our good mutual friend, Rachel Hollis, I believe. And it really stuck with me. I think it's a really powerful statement. And it's not counterintuitive to what we said. It's complementary, but it's also exposing a different truth. And you said that I've never experienced growth without pain. And I think that that's so true as well, that we don't always experience that. Tell me about where that lesson where in your life have you felt that that's just been so true and something where you've got more used to that as well?
I mean, it's happened a lot, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. And it comes in the form of jobs changing, relationships changing, friends changing, it's the whole, your new life's going to cost your old one saying. And that's hard, because if we're going into another sort of aspect of things, and it's this idea of change, and that I don't think we're actually all that sad about where we're going, because the idea is that you're improving and you're expanding. But there is an aspect of you that has to let something else die, and deaths are always sad. So the idea that you'll never see someone again, never live here again, never go to this job again, never park in that spot again. There's the nevers are the things that we have to sort of die to that, and die to the dream. Like, cause I mean, it's in changing, there's essentially an idea that something isn't going to happen that was going to happen. And so it's when that has to go away that you have to allow that dream to die. And I think that's also a really painful thing. However, on the other side of it, and this is why when big things happen and the growing pains happen, you come out the other side and you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like, because you're ending up somewhere better, ideally. So I guess for me, it's come in the form of true emotional breakdowns. Like, I mean, just like where I like get it resonating in my body. I can feel it. And like, I always get a lot of action in my solar plexus, sometimes in my heart, but definitely my solar plexus. Sometimes I have this horrible thing where, I feel it in my body before I know it in my mind. So that's a real bummer. So I'm like, wait, what's going on with why can't I ate a strawberry and I feel like I'm going to buckle over. That's not right. Like, my body's like, and then, it's sort of followed, within the next days by something that is emotional and a breakdown of some sort, and all of a sudden there's usually like a big flood of information that comes through. But yeah, it's that pain, or even on a smaller level, explaining me not watching the news anymore. Right? So I wake up in the morning and it's not maybe painful and I don't have some sort of physical reaction going on, but I kind of have a little bit of a mental one, or, a little bit of an emotional one where I'm thinking, well, I want to watch TV. And it's like, no, this shift is going to be uncomfortable. And so it's a scale, it's happened in all facets of my life. And, I also describe it like, with messages that come through to us as the universe comes knocking for, what we resist persists. So, it's like it's knocking on the door, and then it's like pounding on the door, and then it breaks the door down, and then it comes in, it can't find you, and it burns your house down because you're somewhere in there. Yeah. And that shadow is hiding somewhere.
I've experienced that. I know what that feels like. Yeah, definitely. And what has made you, where have you become more comfortable with letting go? Like, I loved what you explained about I won't be able to park at that spot again, or go to that job again, or I won't see that person again. Like, I think that was when you were repeating those things, I was like, yeah, those are the things we really worry about. Like, that's what we're holding on to. It's that repetition. It's that security. It's that comfort. It's that consistency. That's what you're losing. How have you become better, if you have, or how have you become better at processing letting any of those things go in a way that you think our listeners could today maybe learn, apply, take a few of those things? Because I think, I mean, letting go is probably the hardest human emotion of anything, right? Of any of the things you have to let go, because we get so intimately connected with something.
It's the familiarity of the discomfort. It's that whole, and this is where you start to learn that all these like silly sayings are true. It's like finding comfort in the discomfort, and the comfort is just really just familiarity. You're like, oh, got it. I've been here before. I know how this goes. And you can sort of lessen the blow by surrendering a little bit more to it, because it's in the resisting and the gripping that your house has to get burned down. So just don't let it get to that point where you can just go, okay, not for me. And that comes with like going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation about getting quiet enough that you can start to feel and notice the signs and synchronicities and like the doors that are opening and closing for you, instead of being so like attached to this idea of how things are supposed to go. I also think I have a little bit of an easier time because I'm a future thinker instead of a past thinker. So I think it is burdened on those who are really like symptoms of that would be someone who's like really nostalgic, someone who has a hard time forgiving, someone who is, sentimental, which is kind of like nostalgic, but someone who really ruminates on the past. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a harder time for someone like that, because it's you're associated with memories. So now you're being told you got to let go of those memories. So, but if you keep thinking thoughts of the past, they can only be created in the future. And so, you've just got to learn to let go of them. I mean, look, a future caster has their own issues to deal with, destination syndrome, but I think it gets easier to move on and allow that change when you can just, and you know what, maybe it's, I like to shift my mindset from going from like, oh shoot, like, cause I think like everyone else, when something comes, you're like, no. And then I'm like, but what if it's better than I could ever imagine?
Yes.
And I like trick myself into thinking like, but what if it's going to be better? And the idea is that it should be.
Yes. Yes. It always is somehow.
Let the contribution into into the universe that you've been putting through contrasts and experiences and dreams and visualizations, let it get delivered to you. Because if you keep hanging on to that, you're not going to get that, right? And so you've got to like allow that to happen, but you've got to surrender and make space. You've got to make space in your world. You got to make space in your emotions and your perception, because your perception becomes reality. So, there's a whole letting go. It's like, also, maybe this is something applicable for people listening, is that when I retired, I looked at it like a letting go, not quitting. And so learn the difference between letting go and quitting, because it's a nuanced difference. And to me, it came, and this is about being able to be present, but with the letting go, it's you making an effort and an effort and an effort. And then you go, wait a minute, it shouldn't be this hard. And then you just let it go. Even though it might be you quitting, retiring, walking away, whatever it is, you tried. And so when you've tried, that's not quitting. It's like seeing the signs. Yeah. And so for me at the end of my career, that's what I had to realize, was that, I'd never had a problem with a sponsor before, and they left at the beginning of the year. I had all these other projects going on that I had never had going on, all these other businesses starting. The sponsor wasn't coming along. And so I'm looking at like all these things are happening, and I'm like, you know what? And I'm not that happy when I go to the track, and I'm like, I'm going to look at all these signs and synchronicities and symptoms, and just, this is letting go. This is not for me anymore. But we become so identified, of course.
Definitely.
Like we become, and that's why it's so important to nurture other aspects of yourself. Diversify. It's like a portfolio for anyone who invests or has an investor. Look at yourself like a portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't be all in stocks and not in bonds or whatever your financial advisor does. It's all about like diversifying so that you have stability, because then no matter what happens, one aspect drops out and you have others to support you.
Great insight. I absolutely couldn't agree more with you on that. I think the idea of, just the idea of creating space to really let go and to realize that you can't change the direction you want to go in if you are still holding on tight to something that's being taken away from your grasp anyway. And often that's what creates more friction and more tension, is when you're desperately holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. And you're so right about it being, we always ask the question, like, what if something goes bad? And like your idea of like, well, what if there is an opportunity here for the best thing ever? So, I mean, this has been amazing, Danica. I've been so grateful for your time. We end every On Purpose episode with the final 5. So this is 1 word or 1 sentence maximum. So this is your final 5, Danica. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question is, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Have fun.
Ah, nice. Okay. What's one piece of advice you wish people would stop giving?
I'm so guilty of it. Opinions. You should wait for someone to ask for them. I'm literally practicing this in my life. I'm like, only an opinion when someone asks for it.
Absolutely. It's funny. Sometimes I find like my friends are like, Jay, why don't you like tell us all the stuff you share on your podcast and your book? And I'm like, because in my social relationships, I'm just hanging, because I relate to what you're saying. Like, I am me fully internally, but I don't try and be that in my social circles until I'm asked for it. So I relate. I think that's a really good answer, because otherwise it can be painful to give advice all the time and not see it being lived.
But also, I think that sometimes we refrain from asking for an opinion sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Because we're scared, but also like look at it like a form of respect. If somebody wants my opinion on something or advice, that's a form of respect. This is a form of communication, of relating, of connecting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, question number 3. What's the biggest lesson you learned in the last 12 months?
That I was supposed to be choosing myself all along. Like, my relationships were all about like, this is how it's going to go, and they're not choosing me. And then I'm like, oh God, that's because I was supposed to be choosing myself. Thanks, mirror. Thanks, great big mirror. Love you. Hate you. Love you. So yeah, it's like when we treat ourselves a certain way, that's how we teach others to treat us. And so, I didn't choose myself all the time and didn't prioritize myself enough in certain aspects. So that was the lesson.
Yeah. What's a skill or a habit or a mindset that you've learned now that you think would have helped you as a race car driver?
More telepathy. I think that I probably still didn't visualize enough. Visualization is so helpful. I mean, shoot, they've proven that you can literally increase your muscle mass with your mind.
Yep. Yeah.
So I guess I would have done more visualization.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's a great answer. I mean, a whole section of my book is dedicated to visualizations and meditation because I'm such a big believer. I remember reading years ago about how Lewis Hamilton and David Beckham visualize everything. And so, that's a beautiful one. And obviously you didn't need it. You did it. You succeeded without it. So, but it's a nice addition to everything else.
I remember doing it when I was a kid in go-karting, and I did it. Like, I'd visualize a perfect lap before qualifying, but I'm saying, like, I did, like I said, in go-karting, I'm sitting there like, I don't even know what this is, but I'm like visualizing my perfect lap, executing it. Yeah. But there's always more of that, right? If a little is good, a lot is better.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I could have visualized more perfect passing, more perfect laps, more perfect finishes, visualizing myself winning. I think I could have done more.
I love that. That's great advice. Thank you for that. And fifth and final question, if you could create one law that everyone in the world had to follow, what would it be?
I say this hesitantly. It's because I think that it always comes out anyway. And if it was already put out on the front end, it would reduce a lot of confusion. However, it would be a different world, but it's something I seek every day. And that's just truth. I'm such a truth seeker, and I feel like it always comes out anyway. And if you can't understand what's going on, it's because you don't have enough information, because there's not enough truth included. And so I think that I just would say that everyone would have to be truthful. I mean, I'd also like to caveat that with kindness, but sometimes the truth hurts too. And if we can look at it from a more sort of quantum or spiritual perspective of that, everybody's just a reflection of us, then we really see a lot. Well, we would really see a lot.
That's great. Thank you so much, Danica. That's been an amazing time spending with you. Everyone go and subscribe to Danica's podcast, Pretty Intense. And you can order a book by the same title to find out more about that Woo Man Cave. I love that. And Danica, again, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and energy with us. And I can't believe we still haven't met.
I know.
So I'm looking forward to that day when we can be in the same room together and share some energy and share more of these great insights. So I really, really look forward to that.
I would just love that. It makes me sad that we couldn't do this in person, but I know that day will come, and it might not be in the form of a podcast. And maybe that's the luck, is that maybe if we just let go of this idea that it was supposed to happen for the interview, and now we get to go like have lunch or dinner and meet your wife, and maybe